Welcome to the Rhythms of Discipleship podcast with Jon Cobler, where we help you become disciples who make disciples that live in the five rhythms. Thanks for spending some time with us today. Let's get into today's episode.
All right, and we're back.
Here we are.
Another episode of the Rhythms of Discipleship podcast, where we are all about helping you become disciples who make disciples who live in the five rhythms. My name is Chase. I'm here with Cody. I'm here back with Pastor Jon.
So good to be here.
Woo! Here we go. We're diving in today. We're in rhythm number 4 of 5.
Quattro.
And why are rhythms important? Because Jesus didn't ask you to be a Christian. He asked you to be a disciple. And a disciple is somebody who is following in the ways of Jesus, becoming more like Jesus, and not just emulating his behaviors, but finding the joy, the identity that he had. That's the journey of discipleship.
Yep.
And the five rhythms are just taking all of those concepts that come from the life of Christ and putting them in a way that gives us a starting point, so that we can walk like Jesus and experience that joy, that fruitfulness, and everything else. So, man, this is so important to me, because if we don't get discipleship, we're missing out on the fullness of what God has for every person.
Absolutely.
So, let's do this.
Here we go. Inside out change.
Yep.
Naturally supernatural. Authentic relationships. And now, relentless welcome.
Yes.
Relentless welcome. We're going to dive into it. So as always, we're going to read the definition that we have. And then the first thing we're going to do is you're going to take a couple little snippets of wherever really jumps out to you of where, because right, like with this whole idea, there have been discipleship books written for years. And there have been all kinds of discipleship programs and all these things. And so what we're talking about, discipleship in general, is not new.
Correct.
But these rhythms, to whether you go to church here at Living Water in Olympia, Washington, or you're listening somewhere, in the world, these rhythms are relatively new to you. And so the reason we want to unpack these is because they're new, and we gotta know really what parts to latch onto to grow in these. So
and let me say, they're new only in the sense that what frustrated me was how elusive discipleship felt for so many people.
Yep.
What does it mean to be a disciple? The big picture, it means to be like Jesus.
Yeah.
But where do I start? How do I look? How do I evaluate? Where do I grow? And what I found is not either people didn't know how to think about discipleship. And so it felt like I got to take all the classes. Maybe I got to go to Bible college. I have to be a pastor. Or they kind of had their specialty areas because they loved evangelism, or they loved serving, or they loved witnessing, or whatever. And they got stuck. And that was really the extent of their discipleship.
Yeah.
The five rhythms seeks to fill that out and say, this gives us some kind of like, it doesn't give us the whole picture, but it gives us some borders of what it means to follow Jesus. And then by reading the word and being a part of a local church and continuing to grow in spiritual formation, it fills that in to the fullness that God intends.
Absolutely. Let's jump into this one.
Let's go.
The definition we got here that we're working with: relentless welcome. I look for. I'm gonna start over here.
You can do this.
Schlop,
I believe in you.
doop. Geez, what's going on there? All right, here we go. I look for the people God brings my way that I would not naturally relate to. I make them feel comfortable in my presence. I welcome them in such a way that they know I am glad to be with them. I'm going to read that one more time. And then I saw you're about to pounce on it. It's like I served up a ribeye. I look for the people God brings my way that I would not naturally relate to. I make them feel comfortable in my presence. I welcome them in such a way that they know I am glad to be with them.
Oh, I feel like Clint Eastwood at Outback Steakhouse. Wow. Because when I read that, I think that looks like Jesus.
Yeah.
And it so doesn't look like much of the church.
Yep.
What could look more like the incarnation, which is that God left heaven and Jesus came to earth, put on human skin, got dirty, got smelly, subjected himself to his creation to abuse him because he loved them.
Yeah.
And while he walked among those that were his enemies, making themselves his enemies, he loved them. He welcomed them. He went near to the people that the religious elite marginalized. And he never stopped being who he was.
Yeah. Jesus.
I long to be more like that myself, and to see the church be able to have the confidence in their inside out change, their identity in Christ, that they can be among people that are far from God and be the influencer in that relationship, not the influenced.
Yeah.
And that's what Relentless Welcome is all about. So let's talk about it.
So, I mean, right away, before we jump into this a bunch, I want to ask you, what has this looked like in your life? Because you're a pastor. You work your days in the walls of a church.
Totally.
And I mean, your calendar, it doesn't have a bunch of white space on it. Like, it's very full. And so, like, how does this look like for you? Because if there's anybody that this could actually be really hard for, even though some people would think like, oh no, like I see him on Sundays and he's shaking hands, da, da, da. Like, this could actually be really, really difficult for you. And I imagine it has been. What does this look like in your life?
Yeah. I would say of all the rhythms of discipleship, this is probably one of the ones that challenges me the most, simply because I have to be the most intentional. But I might get emotional when we talk about it, because it also has then meant the most to me.
Yeah.
Because it's doing the hard things that don't come naturally that force us to press into Jesus.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So for Fawn and I, Fawn's my wife, co-pastor, friend, lover, mentor. She's amazing. What it's meant to us is, how can we use the white space that we have to be intentional, to cultivate relationships with people that are never going to come to our space.
Mm-hmm.
Love that.
Right? So whether it's going to the same coffee shop, going to the same place for breakfast, whether it's being willing to have the conversation with the person across the counter at the Target or wherever, the number of people that are outside of the church that I would give my phone number to is probably more than the people inside the church, because I know that's the only connection they may ever have. And listen, here's the key. I'm not doing it to convince them to be something else. I'm doing it because it's in me to love people, because I've been loved. And I know until they know the Father, they're never going to know the heights and the depths of God's love for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you're their only connection point for that at that point.
I don't know if I'm their only one, but who am I to miss the opportunity to be that one?
Absolutely.
Right. I love that sentence. I'll butcher it, but that idea that you use your white space to intentionally pursue, be available for those that would never be in your space.
Right. Because so often we think about, how can I get people to come to me?
Right.
And
church.
Even
so much of church has been that
100%. Invite.
Right.
And yet what Jesus did is he went to them. But I think what this idea of welcome can sound like, I'm welcoming you into my place.
Right.
But it's really more about the space of your heart.
Yeah, it's good.
Like, will you relentlessly welcome people into that space in your heart where you care about them because the Father cares about them?
Mm-hmm.
And so you invest in them. I mean, God didn't love you and say, okay, you got 20 minutes to get your act together.
Mm-hmm.
He just said, I love you, period. Yeah. And Jesus walked with these guys for 3 years, and they constantly failed, but he kept loving them, and he never stopped welcoming them close to him so they could see the Father. I just want to be like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, the whole picture from the beginning of the scripture is that it's people's pride, Tower of Babel, that created division.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always been sin that drives people apart because of their pride. And we go to our separate corners, and we go to our separate neighborhoods, and we find people that look like us, talk like us, act like us, and we try to consolidate all of that because it's safer and easier. And man, if there was ever a year that we saw people revolt against what that produces, it's 2020.
Mm-hmm.
The Me Too movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, and so much around that. Even if I don't agree with what drives some of those movements, what I see is people saying, when we live like the Tower of Babel is how it's supposed to be, it only creates abuse and brokenness.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I go, yeah, the problem, though, isn't just laws or systems. The problem is sin, and
Yep.
Jesus is the only one who can transform that. But I get the pain.
Yeah.
And relentless welcome should be at the heart of every follower of Jesus, because you wouldn't be a follower of Jesus if he didn't relentlessly welcome you first.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. I love the picture you painted as well in the beginning, talking about, just the spectrum of Jesus had, from foreigner to enemy, right? I mean, and people outside of his circle, he found different pockets throughout the Gospels intentionally that we see he pursued.
Yeah.
Right? Or if he didn't intentionally pursue, whatever happened to take place in regards to the interruption, he made space for it. He made time for it. He didn't allow it to be just a interruption or an inconvenience. He took the opportunity to convey the heart of the Father. There's a lot, and maybe we want to come back to this as we unpack it maybe a little bit. So you hear what I ask and say, let's come back to it. But, a lot going on in our world right now in regards to the church and how it receives or does not receive different people, different ethnicities, different cultural backgrounds, and there's just a lot going on in that space when it comes to this idea. I couldn't think of a more important time in history for the church to really audit themselves with how I am doing in this area of relentlessly welcoming people that I wouldn't naturally relate to, as the term we kind of came up with there. And it doesn't happen on accident. It is an intentional decision and awareness that it's going to take for people to step into that. But again, I think one of the things that's helpful for us to highlight is what gets in the way. You mentioned the origin of pride and then sin, but what are some things that when you think about people in your life that are struggling with relentless welcome, what gets in the way from people actually having that in their life and seeing it played out, or the fruit from it?
Yeah. Well, can we go there?
Yeah, let's do it.
I mean, I think there's a lot of things. One would be, it's just simply intimidating to get around people you don't understand.
Yeah.
Right?
Period.
It makes me uncomfortable. It makes me wonder what connection point we have.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me wonder, what am I going to get out of this?
Yep.
So one of those things that keeps it from happening is thinking this is about me getting something out of it, when it's probably more about what can I be in the name of Jesus?
Yep.
With no strings attached. I think number two, we often see people as problems when Jesus sees an opportunity.
Yeah.
The one I go back to over and over again is Mark 6, when it gets late and the disciples look at the crowd and say, it's a desolate place, the hour is late, send them away. What does Jesus do? He says, no, have them sit down. He brings them close. He feeds them. It's just totally different perspective. And so I think oftentimes when we see a problem, and how do you know? Like, how many people have I talked to that I've thought, I don't know this, maybe it's somebody on the street, maybe it's somebody that I bump into, and I'll have conversations with people for 20, 30 minutes and walk away and go, no idea what the point of that was.
Sure.
Because you're not always going to make a connection or
Right.
see the deposit.
Right.
But I've also walked away from some of those and only found out months or years later the impact or the trickle effect that had on somebody's life.
Yeah. So good.
Yeah. Yeah, I the thing I think, and it's kept me from being relentlessly welcoming, is just comfort, like the idol of comfort.
Yeah.
I think in lots of ways, everybody designs their life for maximum comfort. It's like, I want to make sure my AC and heater is always working. I'm going to wear the most comfortable clothes. Jon Cobler, you just always look comfortable. But
I mean, sloppy.
Yeah.
But I think
Merino wool.
it's merino wool. Dang it.
Well, you can't argue with that.
But I think, and that presses, and that's probably another way to say a lot of what you were saying. But I think comfort is just that violates our comfort because it puts us into situations that we're not comfortable in because either we don't know what we're going to get out of it or it's just we don't know how to relate. But whenever that comfort gets threatened, we instantly want to kind of get away from it. And I just think that is such a thing that can get in the way. But again, looking at the example of Jesus, like he gave up the comforts of heaven.
Right.
He literally said, comfort will not be the thing I serve.
That's right.
And went to the people that needed him.
Yep.
So I think if we allow comfort in any form or fashion to really become an idol that we worship, and it will always get in the way of interacting with the people that Jesus wants us to be with.
Yeah.
So that's what I've seen in my life personally.
Yep.
Is just the more I try and organize my life to be comfortable, the less I see myself being around people that I wouldn't naturally be around.
Yeah. I think it's important to observe as well through the Gospels that the religious elite, the religious people will always be frustrated and rustled by a relentless welcome.
Yeah.
I mean, so, when you see Jesus have those intentional moments of pursuit with somebody who does not look like, smell like, think like, act like, behave like, or agree with all that he's about, and he's still engaging them, you got a group of people who are looking at that going, whoa, that doesn't look like what we do. And there's balance to all that. But I think this is, especially in today's day, there's so much on the digital front. So you do have the still in-person interactions, the person at Target, the coffee shop that you frequently attend, so you develop a degree of consistent rapport and relationship with the baristas. But I also think there's something on the virtual space that's out there too, social media, et cetera, where, so as soon as somebody says something that disagrees with what you would think or believe, we're done. There's no pursuit.
Right.
I'm not gonna associate. I'm not going to. And if I do, maybe there's still probably a group of people who have a hard time seeing you do that and feeling like, it's okay. And I think that, man, how relentless welcome looks like a lot of the time too in today's day and age is still being okay to pursue and being relentlessly welcoming towards people who don't think, act, believe like you do yet.
And where I get nervous when we talk like that is what happens when somebody comes in who's so different in what they think, believe, and act that they begin to affect or influence you or your household or your community. And that's the Bible says bad company corrupts good character.
Right.
But that's why the rhythms of discipleship are so important.
Yeah.
Because when you have inside out change happening, when you have comfortability being naturally supernatural, when you have authentic relationships, the possibilities of that outsider becoming the dominant force in your life is so much less.
Right.
Yeah.
And we do have to be wise. I mean, I think things like who you're going to date, who you're going to be vulnerable and in authentic relationship with, you do have to be careful because the more close you get to somebody, the more their loves influence your loves.
Yep.
And if you want to love Jesus and they don't want to love Jesus, then the closer you get, the more of a real conflict you're going to have.
Yeah.
But I can always love somebody that doesn't love what I love.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Jesus did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you're walking in the other rhythms, you have this incredible influence stream rhythm in your life that, like when you have a whole orchestra going, when one piano key goes wrong, it's not nearly as dominant than if you just were playing the piano.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
A solo piece.
There you go.
Yeah. I mean, I cannot shake those moments in the Gospels when, Jesus is intentionally associating himself with a sinner. And the religious people are just baffled by it and accusatory towards Jesus. And he's going like, that's actually, I didn't come here for the healthy.
Right.
I came here for the sick or who need the doctor kind of mentality. And
what would you say to somebody though? What would you say to somebody who is all about relentless welcome, but you don't see authentic relationships in their life?
Yeah. Not healthy.
How come?
Dangerous. to what you kind of just communicated. And I think a lot of what culture outside of Jesus centered, that the social, not just social justice, but like a lot of the like, you know, the well-intentioned and well-executed care for people groups that are out there that do great things that don't have Jesus at the center can find themselves in that space where they're missing something when they don't have authentic relationships that are continuing to keep them tied back to the scriptures, to Jesus, to the gospel. You could just, you know, anything goes and you keep doing whatever you want to do, and I love you and I care, I'm going to relentlessly welcome you to death. Nothing has to shift or transform. And I think if the reality is, you know, Jesus's relentless welcome towards the sinner had a direction, right? It wasn't just the love for the moment to feel cared for and accepted in what they were doing. It was the initial moment to then help the heart be open to the transformation of being transformed, right? And that's the big piece. And
Jesus never was so welcoming that it allowed that welcome to become more of a priority than being who he was and being connected to the Father.
Absolutely.
Right? So that always seek first the kingdom. That always has to come first. But man, I think that there's such an opportunity. And so often in Scripture we see that the world is going to see Jesus by the way disciples love them and love each other.
Yeah, absolutely. So to kind of tie the bow, sew the button, cross the T, dot the I,
zip the zipper.
By the way, can you, has nothing to do with discipleship at all, can you name the brand of the most popular zippers that are installed on garments in the world? Is it ZKY?
YKK.
YKK. There you go. Come on, Chase, give me some.
He was there though.
Bam. I'll take more random trivia for 500, Alex. But so, well, I just felt like that. Like it's like
ZYK.
discipleship.
ZYK. I knew there was a Y and a K.
I bet you.
Zipper.
I bet you ZYK somewhere.
No.
If you know John. No. Listen. I bet you somewhere there is a fly fishing company named ZYK. I guarantee that's what it is. I guarantee.
It's a good one.
They probably make some kind of cool flies or something.
One thing that we can't overlook in this conversation, this isn't just about people inside and outside the church either.
Right.
100%.
Right? Like it's grandmas and grandpas.
Yeah.
And junior hires.
Yep.
Oh, man, if the church could get that. Because we have this tendency, everybody goes to their own room based on how old they are.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Some of that's really practical.
Oh, man.
But if we allow that to be the norm 7 days a week, we're missing out on so much.
So much.
And guess what? Grandmas and grandpas out there, fathers and mothers, it's always your responsibility to turn around to those who are younger and say, let me come along with you. Let me welcome you into my space, but not demand that you do what I do in order to build those relationships.
Right.
Yeah.
So, man, what if there was a church that almost didn't need youth pastors because there were so many fathers and mothers in the faith that took responsibility for even those that didn't belong to them?
Yeah.
I mean, would that not be so attractive?
Yeah, it'd be beautiful.
In a picture of heaven.
Yeah.
So, Relentless welcome goes across the board.
Generations.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I don't know if that would have been what you're going to answer to my question, but if you're going to leave somebody with one last thought about relentless welcome, what would that one thought be of like, this is, if you want to grow in this is what you go after?
Number one, open your eyes and look around.
That's good.
And if you can't identify people that you consider to be other, then you just need to look harder because they're around you.
Yeah.
Number two, start by making a habit of knowing people's names. Just make that a habit, whether you're at a grocery store or at the shopping mall, Target, Walmart, coffee shop, restaurant. Don't interact with anybody without saying, "What's your name?" and then thanking them by name.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a simple way to practice a little bit of welcome.
I've watched you do that a ton, and I've done it more because I've watched you do it. And another tip with that is like if they have a name tag, a lot of times they have something on, just you see it already. You don't even asking.
Use it.
Use it.
Yeah.
use it, and they're always shocked, right? And every
Yeah.
time you're like, "What? Oh yeah, I have a name tag. No one uses it." Yeah, to your point.
Really good. So I think look around, know people's names, and then just start somewhere. Just start with a conversation. Start with an invitation. Kindness and love are always first steps in relentless welcome.
Yeah.
And so maybe it's not taking somebody out to dinner or inviting them to your house, but it's remembering their name. It's looking them in the eyes. It's all those little things that can begin to cultivate a sense of welcome that opens the door for God to do all kinds of things. And I think those are really, really powerful. And if you get close to somebody and start to feel like, this is too much, and want to back away, before you back away, ask yourself, have I ever been like this to Jesus, and how did he treat me? I mean, if you look at somebody and say, oh no, I can hate the sin but love the sinner. I heard somebody say, I think Billy Graham said, why don't you love the sinner, hate your own sin, and let God be the judge of all?
Ooh.
And I thought, well, that's makes me convicted.
Yeah.
But the point is, before I want to back away because somebody's lifestyle, because their choices, because I don't want to be associated with them, would those things have stopped Jesus?
Mm-hmm.
And if not, and I'm in authentic relationship, and I'm experiencing inside-out change, then I think I'm going to risk getting closer for the sake of relentless welcome.
Yeah.
For me, it's not necessarily a tip or anything as much as it's like, this is one of the most exciting pieces of following Jesus for me. Like, when I think about this idea, like, this is the stuff that, like, you know, maybe part of it is, you know, over years of being in ministry, you know, and how I've allowed at times things to get calloused or whatever. The stuff that removes the calluses the fastest and kind of like reignites a fire in me for like loving Jesus and wanting to follow him and love people like him is those relentless welcome moments that happen. And you remember, like, oh yeah, like, this is what, man, it's about. It's people that are far from God, or people that don't look like me yet or think like me yet. When I say me, the Bible or things of God, but they're still loved by God now. And I think that's the thing, that if I'm somebody listening that's considering, man, I want to start walking in this, it's just to, like, get ready for just exciting moments with the Lord and with people when you really start stepping out and being intentional and allowing this rhythm to be moving in your life of relentless welcome.
Love that.
Yeah. Love it.
You?
I think for me, the thing to grow in relentless welcome, oddly enough, this might sound weird right at the beginning. I was having a conversation with a hostage negotiator, like a couple months back. You know, Jeremy Nix.
Were they on the other side of the door?
Yeah, right. You know Jeremy
Yeah,
Nix. Yeah. So he was a hostage and crisis negotiator with the sheriffs for years, retired since. And he was telling me the story about this guy that was on a bridge one day, and you know, everyone's just thinking, I mean, traffic is stopped. It's an inconvenience to everybody, you know. And it was when he had just started as a negotiator, and they're like, Nix, you're up.
Wow.
And so he's like, dude on a bridge in San Diego County, all the traffic stopped, and he's the dude to go talk to him. And I'll never forget what he said. You know, it's so easy to look at the movies and all that stuff, and people can think that it's a negotiator's job to get their way. Like, your job is to get him down. And what he said, he's like, our main goal is to develop relationship with them and let them know they're not alone. And what he said, and I wrote it down earlier, he said, the way you build a relationship and make somebody feel like they're safe with you is ask more questions than you make assumptions.
Wow.
And he just started asking questions, and turns out, like, he just went through a bad divorce, and the reason he was in San Diego from Washington actually was because he was getting ready to go on a trip with his son surfing. And it built this relationship and this rapport, and eventually this guy stepped off, and you know, so on and so forth. And I think when it comes to relentlessly welcoming people, it's so easy, and you said it earlier, it's so easy to just think, what can I get out of this?
Yep.
And with Relentless Welcome, it's so not about you.
Yeah.
It's so not about you. And again, it's what we see with Jesus. He knew, like, this wasn't about him. It was about these people. And I think in order to get better at that, one of the first things that I think of in my head is I just got to get really good at asking questions. And if maybe it's what's your name, or whatever. But asking questions, I think, starts to build these bridges with people that you would never have built bridges with before.
Yeah.
You guys inspire me. You guys are great at this.
It's an awesome conversation. I hope it's helpful as you're listening and watching. We just pray these rhythms really begin to take root and develop in your life. And we got one more for the next episode. We'll have rhythm number 5. But for now, thanks for listening to the Rhythms of Discipleship podcast, where we are all about helping you become a disciple who makes disciples, who lives in these 5 rhythms. Until next time.
We'll see you.
See ya.